Aileen Carol Wuornos is arguably the most famous female serial killer in history. Her nicknames were the Damsel of Death and the Florida Highway Killer, and she was responsible for the death of 7 men between 1989 and 1990. She was born on February the 29th, 1956, into a very troubled family. Her mother Diane Wuornos married Aileen's father, Leo Dale Pittman, when she was just 14 years old. Less than a year after marrying at the age of 15, Diane Wuornos gave birth to Aileen's older brother. At the age of just 16 or 17, the records aren't clear, Diane Wuornos gave birth to Aileen. Shortly before Aileen was born, her parents filed for divorce and Aileen's father went to prison. By the time Aileen was born, her father was already incarcerated for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl. He was schizophrenic and possibly a sociopath, and he committed suicide in prison by hanging himself shortly before Aileen's 13th birthday. When Aileen was almost 4-year-old, her mother left Aileen and her brother with their maternal grandparents and left forever. Her grandfather was an angry alcoholic and, according to Aileen, he used to beat and sexually assault her from a very young age. Though members of her family deny that her grandfather was an alcoholic or a violent man, others in the neighbourhood confirm their version of events. By the time she was 11, she was already reportedly engaging in prostitution, having sex at school for food, drugs and cigarettes, as well as supposedly having sex with her brother. At 14, she became pregnant after one of her grandfather's friends raped her. She gave birth to a son in a home for unwed mothers 1 month after her 15th birthday. She put the baby boy up for adoption. Just a few short months later, her grandmother died from liver failure due to alcohol abuse. Afterwards, Aileen dropped out of school and her grandfather kicked her out of their home. Now homeless, she made a life for herself by living in the woods nearby and prostituting herself to make ends meet. She was 15 years old. At 18, she would be arrested in Colorado for a number of things such as drunk driving and firing a gun from a moving car. She failed to appear in court. 2 years later, at the age of 20, her grandfather committed suicide and Aileen decided to hitchhike to Florida. There, she met a man 49 years older than herself. Local yacht club president, 69-year-old Louis Gratz fell. The two quickly married, but Aileen didn't change her ways. She would frequently get into loud, drunken arguments in bars and would eventually be charged with assault during one of them. In addition, her husband claimed she hit him with his cane. Only 9 weeks after their wedding, he had the marriage annulled and filed for a restraining order. That same week, Aileen's older brother, Keith, died from esophageal cancer. To her shock, her brother left her $10,000 in life insurance. She bought a nice car with the cash and quickly got in a crash and wrecked it. Within 2 months, the money was all gone. In 1978, she shot herself in the stomach after a boyfriend broke up with her, but she survived the presumed suicide attempt. On May the 20th, 1981, the then 25-year-old criminal was arrested for the armed robbery of a Mujik market convenience store. She stole 2 packs of cigarettes and $35 in cash, and later told the judge she did it on a whim, hoping to prove to herself that her live-in boyfriend Ray loved her by getting herself into trouble and having him save her. She wrote, "If he loved me enough and helped me out of the mess I'm about to get in, then I'd know he truly cared." Her beat-up station wagon broke down while drunkenly drove away from the scene of the crime. She was immediately arrested. She went to prison for a little over a year. Over the next 2 years, she would be arrested and questioned by the police several times for forging checks, allegedly stealing a car, resisting arrest, using a fake ID, and allegedly pulling a pistol out and pointing it at a male companion while demanding money. In June 1986, Aileen met Tyria Moore in a gay bar on Daytona Beach. The two quickly hit it off and went home together. They would stay together for 4 years, though Tyria would later say that in the end they were more like sisters than lovers. Tyria was 24 years old, working as a hotel maid when she met Aileen, but she quickly gave that up to travel with her. They lived in run-down motels and trailer parks, and Aileen supported them through her prostitution. One day, at the end of November in 1989, Aileen made a shocking confession. After driving home in a Cadillac that did not belong to her, Aileen told Tyria that after one of her Johns had tried to rape her, that she shot and killed him and disposed of his body, and then drove home in his car, which she would later abandon. That John would be Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner and a convicted rapist that she picked up along Interstate 75. She had shot him 3 times in the chest, and his official cause of death were 2 bullets that had lodged themselves in his left lung. Tyria reacted to Aileen's confession by telling her to shut up and not tell her anything more, that she didn't want to know any more information. However, over the next year, Aileen would frequently come home with stolen items, and Tyria began to feel paranoid about where they might have come from. Aileen likely killed her second victim, 43-year-old machine operator and construction worker David Spears, in mid-May of 1990. His naked body was found on June the 1st with 6 bullet holes in his torso. His car would be found abandoned with the license plate missing and the doors unlocked. His body was identified through dental records. At her trial, many people testified that he was a very honest, hard-working man, incapable of the violence Aileen Wuornos claimed he committed. Though, of course, it's also worth noting that many of them probably didn't envision him picking up a sex worker on the highway either. Her third victim was Charles Casgarden, a 40-year-old rodeo worker who went missing on May the 31st. His body was found in an isolated area, covered with an electric blanket and plenty of grass. It was rapidly decomposing, and investigators could not determine exactly how long he had been dead for. They also had difficulty identifying him, but a police detective in charge of the case managed to match him up with missing persons file. Charles Casgarden was shot a total of 9 times in the torso. Later, people questioned Aileen's assertion that if she was only acting in self-defense, why did she have to shoot him so many times? Aileen Wuornos, fourth victim, is the only one whose body has never been discovered. However, investigators are certain she was the one responsible for his death. On June the 7th, 65-year-old Peter Sims left his home in Jupiter, Florida, to embark on a road trip to visit family in Arkansas. He was a retired merchant seaman who spent much of his retirement volunteering at a Christian outreach ministry. On July the 4th, his car was involved in a car accident. 2 women crashed it into a brush and asked a nearby neighbour not to call the police, as they had family living nearby. Nonetheless, someone called the police and they rolled up to find all of the doors and the windshield in the car broken, bloodstains covering the inside of the car, and no license plate. The police entered the car into their database and it matched with Peter Sims, who at this point had been reported missing. Police made a sketch public of the 2 women the witnesses saw. Later, the 2 women would be identified as Aileen Wuornos and her girlfriend Tyria Moore. A handprint found in an interior door handle was also be matched to Aileen. Her 5th victim was a delivery man for the Gilchrist Sausage Company who disappeared during a delivery. 46-year-old Troy Barres was reported missing by his wife on July the 31st. His abandoned delivery truck would soon be found, but it would be another 5 days until his body was found. In Ocala National Park, a family taken advantage of the lovely day and having a picnic would make the gruesome discovery. He had been shot, once in the back and once in the chest. His wallet was taken, but his wedding ring was left behind and was quickly identified by his wife, who also gave police his dental records so they could identify the body. Aileen Wuornos' 6th victim was 56-year-old retired police chief, social services investigator, and Father Charles Dick Humphreys. He specialised in investigations involving abused children, and he disappeared the day after his 35th wedding anniversary. His body was found fully clothed with 6 bullet wounds to his head and torso. It was found by 2 young boys riding their bikes in a secluded area. His daughters would tell reporters, "Aileen Wuornos got an easy death, a little too easy. I think she should have suffered a little bit more. Use the electric chair, let her legs kick and smoke him out of her ears." Aileen's final victim was Walter Gino Antonio, a 62-year-old truck driver, security guard and police reservist. His partially clothed body was found near a remote road used for logging purposes. He was shot 4 times. All of Aileen Wuornos' victims were white males who went missing in Florida between the ages of 40 and 65, who had been shot dead in their cars with small caliber guns. Their bodies were usually found partially nude, but often covered in wooded and or secluded areas. Their cars were always found abandoned and some distance away from their bodies. This was enough for police to begin gathering evidence on a possible serial killer. The sketches of Aileen Wuornos and her girlfriend that were created after witnesses who saw them crash Peter Sim's car caused Mo to panic. For her, this was the last straw, and she broke up with Wuornos and travelled to Scranton, Pennsylvania, to be with her sister who lived in a nearby town. The city Scranton would later be made famous as the setting for the popular sitcom The Office. The show would, ironically, include a storyline based around a serial killer living there. Meanwhile, police had managed to discover some of the victims' belongings in Florida pawn shops. Some of the items had fingerprints on them belonging to Aileen Wuornos, whose fingerprints were in Florida databases due to her numerous arrests over the years. And a number of people called the police to identify Wuornos and Mo after seeing the sketches of their faces on the news. The police managed to track Aileen Wuornos down as living in a motel in Port Orange, Florida. They arrested her in the Last Resort bar on January the 9th, 1991, a bar she was known to frequent regularly. At first, she was only arrested on an outstanding warrant from 1986 for possession of a weapon. But by this time, police had located Tyria Moore in Scranton and had convinced her to extract a confession out of Aileen in exchange for immunity from prosecution. On January the 16th, 1991, she succeeded. Aileen Wuornos confessed to all 6 murders in order to protect Mo. Aileen Wuornos famously claimed that all of the murders were committed in self-defense. 1 year later, the trial for her first victim, Richard Mallory, began. Mo testified against her. Mallory's former conviction of rape was deemed inadmissible in court. Wuornos' lawyers tried to argue that she was not mentally fit. Psychiatrists testified, saying she was most likely had borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, what sociopaths get diagnosed with. Despite all of this, she was still given the death penalty. She also pled no contest to 6 of the 7 murders she committed, all but Peter Sim's body was never found, and got a total of 6 death penalty sentences. At one point, she said, "I wanted to confess to you that Richard Mallory did violently rape me, as I've told you, but these others did not. They only began to start to." However, she would later give an interview, which she believed to be off the record, to filmmaker Nick Bromfield, in which she said something different, essentially stating that all of the murders had been in self-defense, but that she was sick of prison and ready to die. It was during this interview that she would also give one of the most famous statements: "You sabotaged my society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies, and she was executed by lethal injection on October the 9th, 2002. Her bizarre last words, perhaps, point to her sanity or lack thereof. Yes, I would like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. June the 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back." She was only the 10th woman to receive the death penalty since it was reinstated by the Supreme Court in 1976. She refused the option of a last meal, instead just requesting a simple cup of coffee. One of her last requests was that the song Carnival by Natalie Merchant be played at her funeral. She had listened to Natalie Merchant's album Tiger Lily obsessively while on death row. The song is also played in the documentary Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer. Merchant has said the following about the song choice. Aileen Wuornos led a torturing life that is beyond my worst nightmares. It's very odd to think of the places my music can go once it leaves my hands. If it gave her some solace, I have to be grateful. Since her death, Aileen Wuornos' story has indeed been explored in many movies, books and television series, just as Aileen guessed it would be. Most notably in the movie Monster, written and directed by Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins. The film starred Charlize Theron as Wuornos and Christina Ricci as a character based on Tyria Moore. The movie famously won Charlize Theron an Oscar for Best Actress. Wuornos' story was also explored in the 5th season of the television series American Horror Story, where she was played by Lily Rabe. Since her death, the bar she was arrested at, they ironically named The Last Resort, has put up several memorials to Aileen Wuornos. People curious about her often go there to talk about her life or remember her. Before her death, she stated that all she really wanted was to be remembered.